So to start off with, what year were you born?
1957.
Okay. Um, and were you born in Taiwan?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Taipei.
Taipei. Oh,
Mhm.
that's the capital, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And what is your earliest memory that you have about your childhood?
Um, yeah, I think it was the five of us. I think I remember there was my mother, my father, and me and my two sisters. So we were three sisters, and we all shared one bedroom. So it's kind of cramped. Yeah, that's what I remember.
Hmm.
Yeah, living in one room. Yeah.
Okay.
hmm we shared our house, so it was with living in my grandfather's house, and he had my grandmother, and who was kind of shunted to the back room, and because my when they were refugees in mainland China, escaping the Japanese bombing as well as the Civil War, they were he and my grandfather and grandmother were separated for a while because my grandmother fled with her children to the interior of Chongqing, the city of Chongqing in Sichuan province, fleeing the Japanese because they were in Nanjing. But my grandfather, who was an official, stayed behind in Nanjing.
Oh, wow.
That's when he took a mistress, a younger mistress. And at that time, under the Kuomintang, they had already banned concubinage. Do you know what concubinage means?
No.
It's one man with multiple wives.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which was legal in traditional society. But so they don't have students with any kind of East Asian background. So you could be any student to do this interview with no Asian
Um,
studies background.
yeah, this is just for a GE class, so a whole bunch of
Okay.
people are taking
Yeah,
it.
yes.
Yeah.
So much of this is so different and new to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah. All right. So of course it was this kind of what do you call it? Polygamy
Okay, yeah.
was already not legal,
Mm-hmm.
but most people didn't abide by it, and it was still acceptable, socially acceptable. So my grandfather took a mistress, and when they all moved to Taiwan, the mistress did not live in our household. She would occasionally visit, and I remember she was always pretty and done up. She was much younger than my grandmother, and
Mm-hmm.
she wore the qipao, which is the traditional, not traditional, it's a newish Republican era dress with the high collars and the,
Okay.
what do you call the opening with the buttons.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
it's kind of similar to the top of the national costume that women wear in Vietnam. So
Okay,
the
yeah.
top part is the same, except the bottom part between the Vietnamese and the Republican Chinese is different.
Okay.
Anyway, so the mistress wore this when she visited us, and we children liked her because she would often bring little snacks for us, like roasted corn on the cob or roasted sweet potatoes. That was kind of like street food that you buy.
Okay.
So we always thought it was a treat. um, but years later, my grandmother when I interviewed her when I was in my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
before she passed away, she talked about how humiliated she felt and
Yeah.
how angry she felt.
Mm-hmm.
being shunted to the back near next to the toilet.
Oh,
Yeah. So those are my earliest memories, yeah, of growing
okay.
up in a very tight living situation, multiple households there. So besides my family, there was my uncle's family. So my uncle was the younger brother of my mother,
Okay.
and they shared the same father. So he was, and his family also lived in one room in the house, and they were husband, wife, my uncle, my aunt, and their two children.
Okay.
So it was kind of
Wow.
crowded.
Yeah. And your family was fleeing China during World War II, is that correct?
Yes, my
Okay.
parents and my grandparents came from mainland China.
Okay. Wow. Um, okay. What was your neighborhood like growing up?
It was a in the city of Taipei, and I remember we were walking distance of a park with stone animals like tigers and elephants made of cement
Okay.
and then painted with colors. And so my mother would occasionally take us to the park and we would get to ride the animals. So she would lift us up and ride on these concrete animals.
Oh,
That was a lot of fun. We have some pictures of that. Yeah. One year there was a flood and it inundated the city of Taipei. And I remember we had to leave our home because the flood was inundating everything. And so we um, had to cross through the park and go to my office, my mother's workplace. She worked for a tea company.
okay.
And so it was a white collar job. And we escaped to her office building because it was multi-story and we can go on the upper floors and hide out from the flood. So I
Wow.
remember that um, everything on the street was flooded, and as a child, the waters reached my waist. So it was very scary
Yeah.
because, back then, um, most people didn't know how to swim.
Oh
We
yeah.
didn't, learn how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very scary when the flood kind of almost lifted me off my feet
Wow.
a few times just crossing that neighborhood. So our neighborhood was back then it was quiet,
Okay.
and it was kind of like a little enclave of a warren of back streets,
Mm-hmm.
residential, and each house was walled in
Okay.
with a little tiny yard and a front gate. And then when you stepped out the front gate, there was a putrid sewage ditch. So that's how there wasn't sewage was not piped, covered
Yeah.
over. It was an open sewage ditch that
Oh
was
yeah.
black and yucky. Yeah. But you would have also bird of paradise growing out of it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they had natural fertilizer, right?
A little garden. That's
Yeah.
fun.
So you have
Uh,
to cross over, step over the sewage.
okay.
But it was covered over in places
Yeah.
with kind of um concrete lids or
Oh, okay.
cement kind of covering with a
Mm-hmm.
hole in the center. Yeah.
Okay. How old were you at the time of the flood?
Oh, I think I was about four.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So those are my earliest memories
Yeah.
to age 3 and 4. Mhm.
Okay. Was it just a ton of nonstop rain that caused the
Yeah, I
flooding?
think that year it was a lot of rain. Taiwan
Okay.
is a
Yeah.
subtropical
Oh,
region,
yeah.
It's very hot in the summer and lots of rain. When it rains, during the typhoon season, it pours
Hmm.
sheets of water.
Yeah. Wow. That
But
must
it
be
usually didn't flood.
okay.
I just have a memory that
Yeah,
that year
just
was
that
special.
case. Okay. Um, what kinds of values did your parents instill in you?
Um, I think the most important thing was hard work and respect for authority.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of traditional and
Yeah.
piety. That's traditional Chinese um, ways of thinking.
Hmm.
Yeah. And kids are supposed to be obedient and be quiet. And those were things. It doesn't mean we necessarily observed it. Those are the things that we were supposed to
Yeah.
do. Mhm.
Um, how do you think these values have played out in your life here in the US as an adult?
Um, so I think I came to the US as a teenager when I was 14.
Okay.
So I went to a school in Cupertino, and
Oh,
this high school is called Monte Vista High.
okay.
And today it's it's if you graduated from Monte Vista High, you're supposed to brag about it because it's a very famous high school now. It's a very elite or prestigious because it's so many people have come out of Monte Vista High. It's very competitive, and
Yeah.
back then it was Cupertino was a very different place. It was mainly white,
Okay.
and me and my sister uh, were kind of like two of only four Asians at that high school of
Wow.
2,000 students. But later, of course, Silicon Valley became,
Yeah.
Cupertino became home of Apple computers, and today it's kind of like a company town for Apple. Apple has
Uh-huh.
its quarters there. And I visited Stephen Jobs' old home in the
Wow.
garage where he and Steve Wozniak tinkered with their first Apple computer. Um, so, you know, coming to the United States, I participated in kind of teenage rebellion.
Hmm.
So I really had to go against a lot of that Asian, East Asian or Chinese socialization.
Yeah.
And I was fairly rebellious at my parents, especially my mother.
Hmm.
She was really overbearing. And I yelled and criticized her a lot. So, um, but she was not with me. I came to the United States with my sister, older sister,
Oh, okay.
14.
So it was the two of you alone?
Yeah, right. We
Okay.
lived in the home of my uncle in Cupertino.
Okay.
But that was just for the first year. And then my sister ran away and eloped
Oh,
and got
wow.
married with a white American guy.
Hmm.
And then that year we were living with well, we moved out because we felt uncomfortable being kind of charity cases. We lived with my uncle.
Yeah.
Parents were back in Taiwan with my younger sister.
Okay.
And so we felt uncomfortable because we felt obliged always to do the dishes and take
Yeah.
care, babysit. And so we decided to move out and rent a room from an American family.
Okay.
Yeah. Then when my sister eloped, without telling my parents in Taiwan,
Hmm.
um, the landlady we were living with thought that so my sister went off with her husband because they were
Hmm.
married, and they went off being hippies in a van and shooting rabbits for dinner.
Wow.
So I was left by myself. I was in my senior year. I was in my junior year of high school,
Okay.
and the landlady wanted me to move out because since my sister did this, she thought that I would be a
Oh.
balance on her
Mm-hmm.
daughter, who was only 13 at the time, and I
Yeah.
was 15.
Okay.
And so I didn't have anywhere to go. So I went, I had a high school classmate
Mm-hmm.
who I hung out with, and she was kind of a hippie girl. She would wear army boots, and she was very nice and receptive. And so she talked with her family, and they invited me to stay with them
Okay.
for my last year of high school. And so that was a real really helpful for me
Yeah.
because it helped me kind of understand American culture better because
Mm-hmm.
I was living with an American family.
Wow.
Yeah.
And why did you and your sister move to America?
Why did we move? The two sisters move
Yeah.
ourselves to California, to
Yeah.
the United States. Well, my parents back then were afraid that the communists would take over
Okay.
Taiwan.
So it was to
Yeah.
escape
So
that.
they wanted to put us in America. We had an uncle, my mother's
Okay.
brother, who was an engineer in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they were middle class family in Cupertino. So
Okay.
and my grandmother was living with my uncle too. The
Oh
same
wow.
grandmother who was shunted back to the
Oh.
house. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I arrived in Cupertino with my older sister, and we lived with my uncle there.
Okay. Wow. And
So
your
that's how I immigrated to the United States.
okay. Have you or did your parents stay in Taiwan that whole time?
Yeah, well, when the initial years when we lived
Okay.
there, but my parents later
They moved later.
emigrated to California too.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, in later years.
Okay.
Mhm.
Let's see. What kinds of conversations did you have around the dinner table?
So we're going back to Taiwan, right?
Yeah.
So the years when I was in Taiwan, I was very young. So about, um, I was born in Taiwan, and then when I think I was only 1 years old, and I was taken to Bangkok, Thailand, and we lived there
Okay.
for a year, and then moved back to Taiwan.
Oh,
And then so I was only in Taiwan until the age of 5.5.
okay.
Yeah. Uh, so my memories really go back to then in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're that young, you don't
Yeah, you
really,
can't remember.
what you
Yeah.
remember in bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So the conversation at the dinner table, I remember the various dishes we had, and so what my memories are would often be, I would ask what was in the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, we kept on having this mysterious green colored dish. And I remember asking my mother, what is that we're eating? And she would say, oh, it's nothing, it's just chicken. And I would ask her, well, we also have had chicken dishes. Why is this dish green? And it later turned out that it was frogs.
Oh wow. That's funny.
Well, frogs, you can imagine, are plentiful
Yeah.
if you want. There's so much water.
Wow.
I think the French
Gotcha.
wouldn't mind that.
That's true. They got all their
Yeah,
fancy
and
food.
frogs do taste like chicken, and they're probably just as nutritious as chicken.
Yeah, people eat frog legs, I guess.
But yeah, today I don't eat that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
we would eat a lot of internal organs like tripe and gizzards. and chicken heart. I remember I really liked chicken heart as a child. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Um,
Well, Taiwan was very poor back then.
yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, did your whole family eat together every evening, like have a family mealtime?
Yeah, it would be the extended family. It
Okay.
would be my grandparents. If my grandfather would sometimes be away working or something. I'm not quite sure why he was away.
Mm-hmm.
And my father and my uncle would sometimes be away.
Okay.
But most of the time it would be the extended family. So it would be a big table, a lot of people eat
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, what language did you speak at home?
Mandarin.
Mandarin? Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Did you speak any English before you moved to the US, or did you just learn it when you moved?
Um, yeah, I didn't speak English when I was that age in Taiwan.
Okay.
But later on, we moved to Australia, and that's where I learned my English.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow. So you've moved a lot. Where have you lived?
Um, from Taiwan, so I had that 1 year in Thailand, but I don't
Mhm.
remember it in my memory,
Yeah,
like a
you were
baby.
little.
But I do remember moving to Australia because that was so different. Yeah. And that was when I was 5.5 and
Okay.
entered into an Australian public school, elementary school.
Hmm.
And that's where first grade, and we started learning A is for apple, B is for bat.
Ah, yes, the kindergarten.
So that was perfect. I learned English in 1 month. I could speak English in 1 month because at that age
Yeah,
of
when you're
if
little.
that's the maximum language acquisition
Hmm.
age, by the time you reach 8, you're pretty much over the hill in terms of easy language acquisition.
So that's good. You learned it early. So when
Yeah,
you moved
I
to
used to have
America,
an
you could already
Australian
speak it.
accent.
That's funny. I bet you confused some people when you had an Australian accent.
Well, the school kids laughed at me and in the Philippines, and then they would ask me to say some words, and then I would say it, and they would
Hmm.
break out into peals of laughter.
Oh,
Because in the Philippines, it was kind of the Americans took over
oh
from
yeah. So
the
they were used to
Spaniards.
American English.
Yeah, so they were more
Okay.
American accent. And they
Wow.
would laugh at me so much that I got embarrassed and I
Oh.
Australian accent. Yeah.
Okay. What was your favorite food and who usually prepared it?
Okay, so when I lived in Taiwan, my mother would work with we had a servant girl,
Okay.
and the two of them would prepare the food. Yeah. Um, I don't remember what my favorite. Okay, I remember it was chicken hearts.
Oh, yeah, you did mention that actually.
But I don't ever eat it nowadays.
It was
Yeah.
just when you were a kid.
Yeah. Mhm.
Hmm. How did she prepare that dish, the chicken heart?
In Chinese, it's called red cooked method, Hong Shao.
Okay.
Basically, you use soy sauce and add water, and so you kind of cook it in this kind of soy sauce, and also you use five spice,
Oh wow.
yeah, which is anise seeds, and you cook it down until the water the liquid is kind of evaporated. Yeah, so it's called
Okay.
red cooking method.
Hmm. That sounds pretty tasty. Let's see. What did your family do for a living?
My father was worked for the Ministry of Foreign Ministry in
Okay.
Taiwan. Yeah, so he was a diplomat and he would be assigned abroad. Yeah, and that's how we went to Australia and the Philippines.
Oh, okay. So that's why you traveled so much.
Yeah. And so I changed the country growing up. I changed the country every 2 or 3 years, which meant I
Wow.
changed school every 2 or 3 years. So yeah.
Hmm. Wow. Um,
My mother worked for a tea company.
oh,
I think she did accounting or something like
okay.
that. Mhm.
Okay. And she was able to work despite moving so often?
No, she became a housewife, and I think that
Oh,
was the
okay.
problem for her.
Oh, yeah.
She, always had some trouble with her English. Her
Hmm.
English was not very good. So she could, and then she never learned to drive.
Oh, yeah. So it was
So
hard for
she
her to
didn't
work.
have that kind of independence. So in Taiwan, she had independence, but then um, in the subsequent countries, she became a housewife.
Mm,
And I think she was frustrated, so
yeah.
she was angry a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's hard to lose your independence like that.
Well, she could have learned how to drive
Oh,
and how to
yeah.
speak English, but she never managed
Ah,
to do that.
okay. Because she was busy raising your you and your siblings.
Pardon?
Was she just busy raising your family? So she was not
Yeah, she
able
was
to?
became a
Okay.
housewife.
Yeah.
She was yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, let's see. What was your relationship with your mom and dad like as a child?
Um, they fought a lot,
Hmm.
so um, yeah, we were kind of caught in between them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm.
so it's not ideal kind of childhood.
Yeah, that's hard. Um, okay. So you mentioned that you have five siblings, is that correct?
I have two other sisters. I'm
Oh,
number
two
two.
sisters. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
three sisters. We
okay,
are three sisters,
three sisters.
so including me, that's three siblings.
Okay, okay. And what was your relationship like with them, and how do you think that what role did they play in your life growing up?
Well, we had a lot of fun together,
Hmm.
and we sought solace with each other when my
Yeah.
parents were fighting. So it was really great. If I were an only child and having to deal with parents who are fighting, it would be very hard.
Hmm.
So having sisters um, was a kind of source of support, right?
Yeah.
And we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughter together. I remember one of our favorite games was hiding in the covers underneath the quilt
Hmm.
and trying to take off each other's socks. So that was our game. That was a
That's
source of delight. And then also using the bed as a trampoline to my mother's great, you know, she hated that, and she would really scream and yell at us for doing that. And it was such a bummer because we were having so much fun.
Yeah. And what was the age gap between all of you?
So with my older sister was only 2 years
Okay.
gap, and then with my younger sister was 3.5.
Okay.
Mhm.
What kind of education did you have in Taiwan?
Um, I went to kindergarten there.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's after that I left. Yeah, so I started first grade in Australia. So in kindergarten, I remember there was a lot of strictness and rules. I remember that once there was a school event, it was a very crowded affair. There was some performances at school, and I had to go out to look for my mother and and I tried to get back in, but they were very strict. They wouldn't let me back in. I was really disappointed. So that's just one childhood memory I had.
Hmm.
And I think that one of your questions asks, like, what kind of vivid memory do I have? And one vivid memory of frustration was that I saw a spider that was trapped in it was not a spider, it was a butterfly that was fluttering its wings, and it was trapped in a spider web. And I really wanted to save it. But my mother kept on saying, "Oh, don't bother with it. It's nothing, none of your business, and don't worry about it." And she wouldn't help me. I wanted to try to get the broom to save the butterfly, but I couldn't save the butterfly.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was one memory. Yeah. And one question, because our time is almost, it's already passed, but one question I
Mm-hmm.
think that you wanted to ask was, what kind of games did us kids play?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we did have a lot of neighborhood kids. And one memory I have is the Chinese festival of it's called Yuan Xiaojie. It's so like two weeks after the Lunar Chinese New Year, there's a festival that's really appealing to kids. It's called Yuan Xiao. Yuan Xiao is a kind of glutinous rice balls that are have a black sesame or black um, what is called red bean paste
Mm-hmm.
interior, and it's glutinous rice powder wrapped around it, and then it's boiled, and
Mm-hmm.
so it has a sweet center, and that's,
Oh,
you eat that for that festival. And it's also called Lantern Festival because
I've
that's
heard of
when
that.
what the you've heard of it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. When little kids, they get these paper lanterns, and back then there wasn't a lot of consciousness about fire dangers, you put a candle inside. So at night, when it's dark outside and just early evening, these kids go out together and they just roam around on the streets with their little lanterns. So that was a lot of fun. And we would play hide and seek, and we would hide out in the air raid bomb shelters, which was full of spider webs, and it was kind of scary. And but we always had to deal with we called them, this girl who was mentally ill. We called her the crazy girl, the 疯子, the crazy girl. She would, she was not put into an institution. She would just be living at home, but
Mm.
every once in a while, her parents, I guess, or guardians would let her out, and then she would chase us kids, and she would throw stones at us. And once I was even hit on the head with one of her stones. So that was the danger that we faced roaming the streets, is if
Okay.
she might chase us. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay,
And do you have time for more questions, or do you need to go, or
how about one more question?
okay. Let's see. When you grew up, what kind of life and profession did you imagine having as a grown up?
When I was young,
Yeah.
um, I really don't remember about what I thought I would do back
Okay.
then when I was that young. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, do you
Go
want
ahead, ask another.
okay, another one. Let's see. Um, what kind of feelings or words come to mind when you remember your childhood in Taiwan?
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah. Well, I felt that school was a bit
Mm-hmm.
strictness. Yeah.
Mm.
Uh-huh. Lots of rules and regulations. And, back then, that was in the 60s in
Yeah.
Taiwan. Taiwan was under martial law, and there was a kind of militarism to the culture
Mm-hmm.
back then. Taiwan is very different today. But back then, that for a developing nation, usually the schools are pretty strict, and they are trying to build nationalism and obedience to authority. So I felt I got a taste of that. And so it was a big change when we moved to Australia, a Western country, where
Yeah.
they seem to really dote on children. And that was very appealing to me. So there was a contrast where Taiwan, as a developing nation, where the government is trying to, get national integration, get everybody identifying with the nation and being loyal and
Mm-hmm.
patriotic and, marching in lockstep together. Things were very strict. And then you had the old culture of Confucian, respect for authority and filial piety. And so it was very good for me, and it felt very liberating to go to a Western liberal country
Mm-hmm.
where kids are doted upon and given birthday parties all the time. So there was a big contrast there. And I never got a birthday party except until junior high.
Oh.
Yeah. So I would attend others people's birthday parties, and I would always think, oh, why couldn't I get one? Yeah.
Oh.
So that's basically it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then if you get a chance, just send me a signed copy of the
Okay.
consent form I sent you.